Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. This is Monday, February 3rd. If you have any questions, comments, or business with us, come up to one of these microphones, tell us your name and your address, and tell us what's on your mind. I'll ask for the roll call, please.
Cedar.
Here.
Ellery.
Here.
Kinsfater.
Here.
Koopa.
Here.
Laporte.
Here.
McCartney.
Here.
Watt.
Here.
All present, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to amend the agenda and add a closed session after number 13 for the purpose of discussing pending litigation with the city attorney.
So moved. Support.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, closed session will be number 13.5 or whatever you want to call it. All right, go to consent agenda. A, City Council minutes of January 20th, 2020, regular meeting, recommendation approved. And B, Planning Commission 2019 annual report, recommendation receive.
Motion to approve. Oh, go ahead.
Make a motion, we accept it, right?
Support.
All right, the motion made and reported. Anybody have any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, a couple of proclamations tonight. Actually, you know what? Mr. Lockwood, why don't you come and give us a little background on this?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'm just delighted. This is my 11th time in front of you to report the competition for the DDA for St. Clair's Bootlegger Balladeer and Poet Laureate. Every year we try to find something in the history of St. Clair to tell the history of the town and also to show off the talent in the community. We went back to Jerry Amick, who's an old resident of the community, who did a number of interviews with seniors who were at the time when he had a tape recorder. And at one time he interviewed 2 bootleggers. And we've gone back to these bootleggers many times. And we went back one more time. And the 2 bootleggers are Frenchie and Blink. So this year's legend is called Protection Money, and I'll take a few minutes to read it to you. Then I'll introduce our 2 winners. Ed Swiss was not looking forward to his meeting with Eddie. Eddie was an old friend from the logging days in Michigan's northern peninsula. They had worked at McCarthy's camp on the Manistique River. When Ed broke his leg, it was Eddie who collected the money from their fellow lumberjacks to help him tide him over while he recovered. Eddie was Father Crumnecker, and that was who Swiss was meeting today, current priest of St. Mary's Catholic Church. Yesterday, Swiss had attended St. Clair's Knights of Columbus meeting, and someone passed around a list of pledges to rebuild St. Mary's Church after the recent fire. The first time Swiss looked at the list, he didn't give it much thought. Later, it occurred to him that there were a few people who operated blind pigs in the city that were on that list. He was sure one was not a member of St. Mary's congregation, and if the other one was a member, he had never attended services. Before he left the meeting that evening, he took a second look at the list, and he noted that the list included many of St. Clair's bootleggers and blind pig proprietors. He was certain that many were not members of the church, and if they were, he had not seen them at services. Their pledges didn't make sense. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Swiss often met with Father Crumnecker for coffee. He was good company, and he seemed to know a lot about what was happening in St. Clair. Some of the things he told Swiss were things that Swiss didn't think he should know about. Crumnecker told Swiss that the Fed's attempt to arrest Frenchie delivering his home brew to Bill Hill's blind pig. That turned into a disaster, and Frenchie got away. The feds were embarrassed and tried to keep that event quiet. Swiss only knew about it because he was there when they tried to make the arrest. Swiss smiled when he thought about the incident. 2 custom officials came to the police station last winter and demanded that a St. Clair police officer come with them. They received a tip that someone was making a booze delivery to Bill's Blind Pig on Thornapple. The three of them piled into a Jordan Roadster. It quickly became apparent to Swiss that this was more car than the custom agents could handle, and they were driving on snow-covered roads. Snow-covered was an understatement. The snow was piled so high that only one car at a time could go down Thornapple. Swiss had a premonition that with three people in the front seat of a Roadster, this was not going to be a joyride. They waited near the Blind Pig for the delivery. Frenchie pulled up in his Ford and appeared to notice him right away. He didn't do anything but sit there. Because Swift's legs kept getting in the way when the custom agent tried to shift gears, they pulled up slowly. The agent stopped in front of Frenchie's car, got out of the Roadster, and started to advance towards the Ford. Frenchie let them take 2 steps, put his car in reverse, and floored it. His wheels started to spin. One of the agents managed to grab hold of the Ford's fender before the wheels burnt through the snow and made contact with the road. The Ford went flying backwards. Somehow the agent managed to work his way to the car door and open it. When the agent got the door open, Frenchie didn't waste any time. He flew out of the car and took off. Unfortunately, the car didn't stop and rear-ended a stop sign. Its wheels kept running until the agent was able to release the stuck gas pedal. They never did find the keys to the Ford. Swiss was sure he didn't tell anyone, and Father Cromnechter certainly had details of the events few others did. According to the customs official who told Swiss the story, they were chasing French and Blink, bringing a boatload of booze from Canada, when Frenchie and Blink were able to go from full speed to a dead stop in their Chris-Craft right in front of Frank Moore's boathouse. They pulled in the boathouse, unloaded their booze, and left before the customs agent could turn their cutter around. When the agents got to the boathouse, a truck was seen leaving the Moore driveway, driving onto Front Street. The customs officials are still trying to figure out how Frenchie and Blink were able to stop their boat that quickly. Again, the more Swiss thought about it, Frenchie and Blink may have known of the Fed's plans ahead of time. Could Father Cromnechter have found a source that leaked information about the Fed's operations and was selling protection to the local bootleggers to raise money for the church? Swift's stomach started to turn. He wondered how much further he wanted to go with this. He reminded himself that he only had circumstantial evidence, and how many times in the past had the facts revealed the error of his assumptions. One thing he knew was that Father Cromnechter would not lie to him, and he hoped would have a valid explanation. So that was this year's legend, and the challenge was to our contestants to write a poem to tell the story and hopefully answer the question. This year's winner for the Poet Laureate contest was Art Smith. Art Smith, you will remember him, was here last year. So Art, would you come up and read your poem? You can do it right there. Yeah.
Face these guys?
Yep.
My poem is entitled Protection Compensation. Ed Swiss and Father Eddie were old friends back in the day. Both were loggers in the UP, then came down this way. The two came to St. Clair, where Ed became chief of police, and Father Eddie Kromenacher, now St. Mary's priest. The Volstead Act had just been passed, and prohibition started. Brought blind pigs and bootlegging, which were not for the faint-hearted. The local cops and customs men tried to control the action, but smuggled booze from Canada remained the main attraction. In 1919, sad to say, St. Mary's caught on fire. The parish really needed to raise cash so they could hire workers. To rebuild what burned, they took up a collection from members of the church, plus those in need of some protection. A pledge list soon was passed around with names of St. Clair gentry. Some ran illicit businesses in town, and they pledged plenty. Chief Swiss began to wonder why these folks would be so giving to a church that up to then was not part of their living. He set a coffee meeting with his good friend, Father Eddie, in hopes of learning more of what he didn't know already. In previous such meetings, Father Eddie talked about some local info that should have been classified, no doubt. One of the customs men assigned lived just outside St. Clair. As a member of St. Mary's Church, he worshiped there. And as a penitent who every 2 weeks sought confession, he might have let some secrets slip out during such a session. We cannot say for sure, but Father seemed to have insight on what the lawmen's targets were about to be each night. The blind pig owners and bootleggers got this information and certainly were glad to pay protection compensation. 2 incidents now come to mind as Swiss prepared to meet. First, home brew being delivered over on Thornapple Street. The driver, Frenchie, smelled a rat, escaped the scene, although his car knocked down a stop sign. It was quite a fiasco. The second, Frenchie and friend Blink were running booze one day, were spotted by the customs, then a chase was underway. Their boat ashore, unloaded, put their cargo on a truck. The Fed's craft barely turned around, completely out of luck. So at the coffee meeting, Swiss was certain he would find that Father Eddie was for sure the real mastermind to sell the customs plans to catch the local smugglers cold and raise the needed cash to bring St. Mary's back to whole. We can't say how this meeting went, but this we know for sure. The church repairs were done and paid for during the next year. And Father Eddie, bless his soul, was not charged with a crime, continued as St. Mary's priest till 1959.
Stay right there, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, why don't you come back up? I have a proclamation for you, okay? Let me read it, and then I'm going to give it to you, okay?
Works for me.
All right. Mine isn't as fancy as yours, but... Okay, whereas the title of Poet Laureate is derived from the laurels with which the ancient Greeks crowned their most celebrated poets, and whereas in England the position of Poet Laureate and historiographer royal were officially established by King Charles II in 1668, and whereas in the United States during his or her term, the nation's Poet Laureate seeks to raise the national consciousness to a greater appreciation of the reading and writing of poetry. And whereas following an open call for submissions in which poets submitted poems for consideration, and Arthur Smith's reading of his poem, Protection Collection, so stirred the audience that an independent panel of judges selected him as the winning candidate for 2020. And whereas the city of St. Clair has designated Arthur Smith as Poet Laureate for 2020 to express our collective appreciation for his poet excellence and his significant contribution in increasing the awareness of importance of poetry in St. Clair's history in our lives. And therefore, I, Bill Cedar, Mayor of City of St. Clair, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim Arthur Smith the 2020 Poet Laureate for the City of St. Clair this 3rd day of February, 2020. That's it.
Good job.
Mayor and Council, in addition to a Poet Laureate, we also have a contest for a bootlegger balladeer. And this year we had a young lady who's never competed before. And I'm going to tell you something. She's going to knock your socks off. Sedna Horvitz lives here in St. Clair. She works professionally as Steph Ray. And Steph, why don't you come up?
Can I give you guys copies? So that it's hard to understand, without reading. I don't have copies for everyone. I'm glad I made 10. I didn't know there would be 10 of you. The way things happen. So he's going to be
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I really have.
try to be more delayed.
That's probably the least thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I might need to raise this. Can you guys hear me? Is this,
Take it up.
probably.
I honestly don't think she's gonna even need it, so.
He knows what it's like living with a singer. I just put this down here, so I got it up there. But thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. All right. Maybe I can just point it up. Check, check. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so I went ahead and just titled my song Protection Money and based it on the story you guys all heard in the poem as well. Sorry. The tuner decides to not work. Should be good enough. I tuned it right before we left, but with the weather, instruments, you know. All right, so here we go. Without further ado, I'm Steph Ray, and this is Protection Money. All right. River running spirits, a runner smuggling shine, a man of Holy Spirit and a small town on the line. A centuries riddled legend, a cop just fighting crime. Busting up the peddling, oh stuck 2 steps behind. Agents on the case now, the big fish siphoned through. The cop's still trying to figure out how the priest knew what he knew. And 2 men stand on the land before a church, bellowing smoke. One for God, one for the law, and both were for the foe. Well, the cop got the gist after he saw the list, said this pledge collection seems funny. I gotta say that you best only pray for that protection money. Old bootlegger Frenchie was making all his drops at the local speakeasy and down at the docks. Through snow and water, the runner ain't been caught. But thanks to the Father for the secrets that he bought. And 2 men stand on the land before a church, bellowing smoke. One for God, one for the law, and both were for the folk. Well, the cop got the gist after he saw the list, said this pledge collection seems funny. I gotta say that you best only pray for that protection money. 2 men stood for good, 2 strings of a purse, building back the steeple. People, the crime could be worse. Peach and whiskey peddlers preaching every verse. Coffee with the lawman and cabbage for the church. 2 men stand on the land before a church, billowing smoke. One for God, one for the law, and both were for the foe. Well, the cop got the gist after he saw the list, said this pledge collection seems funny. I gotta say that you best only pray for that protection money. Yeah, yeah. Protection money. Whoa, whoa. A centuries riddled legend, a cop still fighting crime.
a man of holy pledges and a small town on the line. Thank you.
Well done, well done. I also have a proclamation for you, Steph, so stay right there, all right? Thank you. Whereas the ballad derives its name from medieval French dance songs or ballades, and whereas ballads are narratives in nature with a self-contained story, often concise, and rely on imagery rather than description, which can be tragic, historical, romantic, or comic. And whereas balladeers are the singers of ballads, and whereas following an open call for submissions, the balladeers' submittal ballads for consideration and live performance commenced, including the singing of ballad Protection Money by Steph Ray, which so captivated the audience that an independent panel of judges selected her as the winning candidate for 2020. Whereas the City of St. Clair wishes to express our collective appreciation for her excellent ballad and significant contribution in increasing awareness of the importance of music and St. Clair's history in our lives. I therefore, Bill Cedar, Mayor of the City of St. Clair, on behalf of this City Council, do hereby proclaim Stephanie Horvath the 2020 Bootlegger Balladeer for the City of St. Clair.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, I just want to say thank you once again for helping us through this.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Stephanie, you guys, great job. You come to a city council meeting, you get information and entertainment. Sometimes. All right. Now on to the least entertaining kind of stuff is the presentation of AEW. We have Ryan here today to talk a little about Woodlands Estates.
Unfortunately, my presentation won't be as entertaining here. Not too entertaining talking about asphalt here. My name is Ryan Kern. I'm a project manager with Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick. Recently, our firm was asked to evaluate, investigate, and provide some estimates to basically repair and complete the asphalt paving over in the Woodland Estates subdivision. I think all of you are aware that that development was done about 15 years ago or so, and at that time, only the base course of asphalt was placed. Which is common for new development, and once most, if not all, of the homes are built, then the top course of asphalt is placed. Fortunately, that top course of asphalt was never placed. 5 years ago, we were asked to evaluate the subdivision. At that time, we looked at two alternatives. One was to do some repairs of the existing asphalt base and then put the new wearing or top course over it. The other option was to pulverize and reshape the entire subdivision, all three streets in that subdivision, and then put a new asphalt cross section on it. At that time, it was viable to do some asphalt repairs. Unfortunately, now that we've reevaluated it here within the last couple weeks, those streets have deteriorated quite a bit since 2014 to the point where doing patches in the worst areas would no longer be viable. Basically, those streets there's cracks throughout all those streets. So if we were only to repair the worst sections and leave some of the moderately deteriorated areas, those cracks would start to reflect through the new top course relatively quick. So at this point, we wouldn't recommend doing patchwork and then doing a top course over that. Our recommendation at this point would be to pulverize the existing asphalt base and then put a new 4-inch asphalt course over top of that in 2 layers. In addition to that, we also looked at a storm sewer crossing that's located in front of 1970 Woodland Meadows Drive, where there's a void that has recently started to show itself here within the last couple months or so. We're not sure if it's a failure within the storm sewer or if it's just a failure with the base itself, but there's a pretty significant void that has formed in front of that drive approach. If we were to move forward with doing repairs on this street, we would be looking to relocate that storm sewer crossing slightly to the east to get it out of the influence of that driveway approach. There are 2 other crossings along Woodland Meadows Drive where those storm crossings are in front of drive approaches. That as an alternate, we also did give an estimate to relocate those 2 crossings as well so that they're no longer in the influence of drive approaches. That's as an alternate. We also did include in the cost along with the pulverizing and reshaping to basically bring the handicap ramps to code. There's 2 locations where there's handicap ramps, one at the corner of Sheldrake and Mallard, It's basically a ramp that goes nowhere. It's not to ADA compliance now, and it would be our recommendation to just remove that ramp since it does not lead to anything. The other location is at the corner of Mallard and Woodland Meadows. There's a ramp on the north side of Woodland Meadows. Again, that's not to ADA compliance, but there's no ramp on the south side to cross to. So it'd be our recommendation to add a ramp on the south side and then reconstruct the ramp on the north side so that you have an ADA compliant crossing there. So we did provide a preliminary estimate that comes to about $258,000 to pulverize and reshape the entire subdivision. That includes the handicap ramp work and that includes the one crossing at 1970 Woodland Meadows due to the void. It was an additional $35,000 on top of that to address the other two storm sewer crossings. We did have two other alternatives that we looked at that you may want to consider. One is, due to that void, you may want to look at the storm and sanitary sewers that are crossing underneath the streets in that subdivision, just to make sure that there are no structural defects within those sewers before you do a final repair to those streets. I think we estimate about $4,500 to do an investigation of those sewers just to see if there's any issues there. The other item that we noticed while we were out there is that there's several drive approaches that have settled behind the back of curb. About 6 to 8 drive approaches that have settled anywhere from 2 to 4 inches, and we did provide a cost estimate of about $15,000 in addition to do those drive approaches as well. Those estimates do include design costs, construction administrative costs, and a 10% contingency as well. Other than the asphalt pavement, the curb, the concrete curb that's there, in the most part is in good condition. There's a few locations that it started to deteriorate. We would remove and replace those few sections that have deteriorated as well. If you have any questions, I'm willing to entertain those.
Pulverize, do you mean grind it?
Yes, correct. Yeah, we'd be grinding the existing asphalt and using that as the new base.
Okay.
So the difference in the two bids are the 258 and the 298 is exactly what you explained?
Right, so the 298 that was provided is if we did those repairs, those asphalt patch repairs at approximately 50% of the subdivision. It probably would need to be more than 50%, but we're trying to show that it would be more expensive to do asphalt patching at 50% or more. It's a lower cost to pulverize and reshape the entire subdivision.
So total, turn the key, it's all done.
That
Looking
would,
at
yeah,
about
that would,
310?
that would, yeah, yes. If you were to consider all the options, it's about $310,000.
So where do we go from here?
So, council ultimately needs to accept the road in its current condition before any sort of special assessment process, assuming that would be council's direction is to do a special assessment versus pay for the entire cost of repairs on the city's own funds. Now, we could basically have the city assessor prepare an estimate, basically prepare that assessment roll, but even if they and they can do so, which we could pretty much tell every property owner would basically translate those costs into a per road frontage foot rate. So, if the price is, let's say, $10 a foot, and you've got, your property's 5 feet on the road, and $50 total, very simple math there. And we can have that prepared, but even if we have that prepared, and then council's ready to act on it, there's still a series of administrative public hearings that have to be done. Like, even if that we would have to create this assessment roll. Typically, it's created during that administrative process. Here, though, given that it's not a public road and we're not entirely sure what council wants to do, or what the residents would like, I'm thinking it probably would be best to get that assessment roll created ahead of time, and then, council may consider that, and residents can consider that, and then ultimately, at that point, then council could decide to initiate the special assessment process, but first they would have to vote to accept the road in its current condition, and then I believe the special assessment process itself lasts 2 to 3 meetings, depending on the timing of the public notices and the public hearings that have to go out. But that could be the next steps, is we could, I just said, essentially.
Are there other options other than assessing it by road frontage? Could they just split it evenly, 27 different ways? I know there were some concerns with corner lots that will probably have 3 to 4 times the amount of road frontage than other residents in there.
I do know that cities in the past can, they kind of make this special assessment policy that guides their decision-making. They typically do a lot of these projects as opposed to very infrequently like we have done recently. I have seen a corner lot discount be used before,
Right.
but ultimately I think the council has pretty wide authority on, how it can structure the assessment. But the most common by far is to do a front foot, rate.
Well, I certainly would like to know what that assessment cost would be, and I'm sure that everyone out in the audience that lives in this subdivision would like to know that as well. And then I think a decision.
Are you tapping for the whole amount, or is the city going to take responsibility for it?
Yeah, I got a question too.
Hold on. When you come up to the microphone and call us who we are first, okay? Just 1 second. In the past, to answer that question, the city has done 25%. Come on up here so we can take this, because some of your neighbors probably aren't here and they're going to want to see what happened. Tell us your name and your address if you can, please.
Say that again?
Name and address.
Matt, 1991 Woodland Estates. So my question was with the storm drains that are sinking, you guys maintain the storm drains? I thought you guys maintained the storm drains or no? The water lines, the sewer lines, storm drains as well? If you guys maintain them, would you guys cover that $35,000 cost, or is that put onto the homeowners?
That we would have to do some research with our assessor to see just what we get a special. The question that Warren had for me was what can be special assessed, what has to be borne by the homeowners.
Essentially, the council can choose to assess whichever parts of the project it wishes. So again, for instance, for this gentleman's question, the additional work for those storm drains, I believe your concern is, to not have that $35,000 worth of work be part of this, the fee the residents pay. The council is certainly able to do that, and they can decide what parts of the work, if there's specific projects like the storm drains that only benefit a few properties versus the entire subdivision as a whole, the council is certainly within its rights to, not either assess that $35,000 only on the properties that benefit, or, the city could, basically take that on if they were to do any sort of cost share. But yeah, the council pretty much has wide-ranging authority in determining who gets assessed what in terms of those additional items with like the storm drains.
All right.
Thank you.
Is this our time to talk about this in general?
Sure, come up here and tell us your name and address if you would, please.
Stephanie Goodell, 1975 Woodland Estates. So I've been thinking about this a lot since we had the meeting prior to this, and something's just not sitting with me about this, right? So I decided to look into things a little bit more. First, what was bothering me is that you all said that this road is a private road. So I looked into city code. City code, chapter 54 is dedicated to subdivisions and their development. Section 54-7 states that the following pertaining to streets and alleys. Private streets and alleys shall not be permitted, but rather all streets and alleys shall be dedicated to the public. In addition to the city code, I found the City of St. Clair Comprehensive Plan, which was published in 2012. In this document, figures 13 and 14 detail the 2008 road ratings and type of rehabilitation needed, respectively. In both figures, the roads in Woodland Estates subdivision are listed. So I wonder why would our roads be in this if they're private roads? Why back in 2012 were you considering them in your rehabilitation plans for the roads of St. Clair? So my question is, was there a variance given when the subdivision developers applied to build the subdivision within the city, which you all had to approve, to be a private road? Why is it a private road?
Yeah.
It's in the city limits. You approved the plan for the subdivision to be developed. You gave permission for city land to be used by developers to purchase and build a subdivision. So why is it a private road?
The road has to be accepted by the city council. It has to be accepted, dedicated first by the developer and accepted. It's a two-step process. The roads are not accepted until they're built to city standards. And as I understand it, they've never been built to city standards. As to your question as to why they would have been considered as a rehabilitated road, I guess I'm not sure who was charged with that, but it may just be an oversight on whoever created that list.
But doesn't the plat have to be approved by the city And so the subdivision has to be approved, the development has to be approved. So what happened when the housing crash happened and they went upside down? And there was so in 15 years since the subdivision was built, there was no oversight by the city, and everybody just kind of let this road go. Because you ultimately, to me, you ultimately have responsibility for this, even though, because it's within city limits. So I get it's a private road. It was never finished because they went bankrupt, blah, 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 blah. But you still have the responsibility for it. Because here's my next topic. There also is in the city code, section 54-63 says that, and this is again regarding subdivision development, and I'm paraphrasing slightly. In order to provide a healthful, clean, and desirable living conditions, the subdivider shall be entirely responsible for installing the following site improvements, or shall furnish to the city a surety bond. This bond should be sufficient to permit the completion of all contemplated improvements before a plat shall be accepted by the city. So, they went bankrupt before you could accept it. Where's the bond? Because that should have covered the money to finish the road, right? That's what a bond is, right? They're giving up money. They're going to put up money to say, okay, if we don't do our end of the deal, you have this money, we don't get it back. Isn't that what it is? Because I've looked into some of this too, and there's a lot of some articles out there about what happened in the housing crash. Depends what type of bond they established. So we need you to tell us what was the bond that was established, which you would have had to agree upon with the developer of the subdivision.
It was bank letter of credit, $17,500 to put it down. That went away when they bellied up.
Yeah.
There was never a bond.
Why was there not a bond? Okay. So then why was there not a bond if that's in the city code? Okay, so whatever it was, why wasn't there a bond if that's in the city code? Maybe it was agreed upon that this is what was going to happen, but I know, I mean, I have the paperwork filled out and I can give it to the city clerk later for freedom. I want to see the paperwork that was approved by the city council to develop the subdivision, because it just doesn't quite add up to me. Why then do we have to be responsible now that we've decided to purchase our home there to fix this road? And as much as I want the road fixed, I urge my neighbors to take the time to consider all these circumstances of the development of our subdivision before we agree to take on the burden of fixing what should have been done to begin with. And in my opinion, the city should have been overseeing this when things went belly up. You got a letter saying that they were going to take money out of the escrow account. I mean, there was money set aside. Who didn't make sure that the money got used to what it was supposed to be? The city didn't make sure. You are still responsible, in my opinion, for the development of the subdivisions in city limits. You approved the development, and you should have made sure that the city code was followed so that the proper assurances were in place by the developer. They didn't meet their end of the bargain. I don't know. And I think I kind of mentioned at the last meeting, are you sure the storm and sewer system's right? And the gentleman over here from the engineering firm's like, yep, you might want to check it out. I'm not shocked. It's just, it doesn't sit well with me, and I can't say that I'm going to pay money for this road to get fixed because something happened 10 years before I moved into the development. I already paid $10,000 to fix the storm sewer to my house that backed up in my basement. I already paid $10,000. Now you want me to pay another $10,000, $15,000 to fix the road?
Thank you. I think this needs a heck of a lot more investigation, not only by Mr. Downey, but Mr. Rothy, because it appears as though there's some loose ends out there that I don't have the answers for right now. What's council's thoughts?
I agree. I agree.
All right. We'll turn Mr. Downey loose and Mr. Rothy loose and try to find out all those things you said. Some of it is going to be, we're going to have to chase the bank down, I guess, because that's where this money was supposed to be. But if they went belly up and bankrupt, then that just changes the game plan, I think.
But
I understand what you're saying.
my problem with that is that's what the bond is for.
There was no bond.
But then it's on you guys for not having a bond.
We can look back in our records too to see what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Ryan. Anybody else?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, then we will go to number 7. Ordinance introduction, regulation of handbills. Mr. Downey.
Your Honor, before City Council tonight is a proposed ordinance that would regulate the distribution of handbills in the city. This has been a topic of some discussion at council primarily last year, and the cities of Marine City and Marysville have passed similar ordinances that do not criminalize the distribution of these handbills, but rather make it a municipal civil infraction if certain criteria aren't followed. So this is a introduction of that proposed ordinance, which again has been on the books in some neighboring communities without any issues for probably a year's time.
I'll make a motion to introduce the ordinance.
Support.
All right, the motion is made. Support. Any questions?
Yes,
Call the
Your
roll.
Honor, I
I'm
have a
sorry.
question.
Oh,
Does this prohibit it even if somebody wants to receive this?
No, the language of the ordinance, you'll note, indicates if the homeowner or the business does not wish to have it, they have to honor that wish.
This is more of a recourse if you don't want it and you call and say you don't want to receive it, there's some enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Call the roll, please.
Koopa?
Yes.
Laporte?
Yes.
McCartney?
Yes.
Lot?
Yes.
Ellery?
Yes.
Kinsfater?
Yes.
Cedar?
Yes.
Ordinance introduced, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, B is a resolution 20-03 quarterly budget adjustments. Mr. Rossi.
Yes, council members, before you tonight is essentially a budget amendment that will accomplish a purpose of making an additional payment into our pension system. And where this money has come from is the building fund, which is where all our building department and code enforcement activities, where all that comes from. It's traditionally supported by a transfer of money from the general fund into the building funds to help, support day-to-day operations. Now, with all the increased building activity in town with the St. Clair and the apartments on Clinton Avenue, for instance, last year the building fund revenues exceeded expenditures by just over $100,000. Basically, I think that instead of, they basically made a $100,000 surplus in that building fund last year. And so instead of transferring $45,000 from the general fund into the building fund, essentially what we should do with that $45,000 is contribute it into our pension plan, which would be a contribution above the actuarial required amount in our pension funds, and that would be, go right into the assets, start earning returns for the pension system payments. So when you look at this, we made a $250,000 payment last year. This year, I'm just saying, let's at least right now make a $45,000 payment. This would mean we basically would have contributed about $300,000 above the minimum amount in our pension system, and I think it would be a fiscally responsible use of these funds that have been budgeted to be transferred out of the general fund. And in my memo, the budget amendments in order to accomplish this are presented.
If it was scheduled for building fund, can we do that?
Yes.
So we can discuss the motion. I'll make a motion to accept the budget adjustment amendment.
I'll support.
All right, the motion is made. Support. Any questions? All right, call the roll, please.
Laporte?
Yes.
McCartney?
Yes.
Watt?
Yes.
Ellery?
Yes.
Kinsfater?
Yes.
Koopa?
Yes.
Cedar?
Yes.
Adopted, Your Honor.
All right. Go to C, Resolution 24, lot split combine 1409, 1419, 1421, Fredmore Highway D.
Yes, Mr. Al Johnson is requesting a lot combination split on properties that he owns at 1409, 1419, and 1421 Fredmore Highway. You should have a survey in your packets. What they're going to do is they're going to combine 1421 with parcel 1, and then on parcel 2 they're The rear end of that parcel, 222 foot wide by 668 foot deep, is going to be combined to parcel 1, which would make that 11.54 acres, and parcel 2 would end up being 2.78 acres. It's all zoned. The first 350 feet is zoned R light industrial. The rear property is heavy industrial. So, any questions?
So it meets all the zoning requirements and setbacks?
Pardon?
It meets all the zoning and setback requirements?
Well, the setbacks, until something's built, they won't have to hit those. But yeah, it abuts mixed use to the west, where Paul Wade lives. But that's about it.
I'd make a motion to approve the lot split as presented.
All right, the motion is made and supported to approve the resolution for the lot split combine. Any questions? All right, call the roll, please.
McCartney?
Yes.
Watt?
Yes.
Ellery?
Yes.
Kinsfater?
Yes.
Lupa?
Yes.
Laporte?
Yes.
Cedar?
Yes.
Adopted, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Let's go to number 8, reports of administration. Mr. Roth, do you have anything tonight?
Just two quick things. First, the auditors were in 2 weeks ago doing their field work. I think that went very well considering all the turnover in the accounting department that we've had. There's a few more outstanding items that myself and our new accountant and Jessica, the treasurer, are working on in order to complete the audit, but we're moving right along in those items, and we anticipate having the audit filed with the state of Michigan on time, which is by the end of March. And lastly, I've been asked by my friend Randy Fernandez, the city manager of Marysville, to mention to everybody that there is a new kiosk in Meyer for Secretary of State, and you are able to get your tabs and other various things printed right there for you, instead of going to the office. And it's brand new. It's in Meyer, in Marysville, and it's a great. No more going up north in order to get that stuff.
That was Randy's idea.
God bless him. God bless him.
Any questions for Mr. Roth? All right, Mr. Dow, do you have anything?
I have nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Any city departments?
Yes, Your Honor. Just another reminder of the presidential primary election on Tuesday, March 10th. Ballots are now available, so you can stop into City Hall, or you can call and request an absent voter ballot by mail, too, with an application.
Thank you. Deeds, authorities, boards, and commissions. Anybody have anything? All right, we'll go to number 9. We have no unfinished business. 10, new business, approve appointments to 2020 boards and commissions. I have applicant Diane Ives. The only recommendation I have is for the ZBA, appoint Bill Kleeman for a 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2021, and Diane Eves for a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2022.
I motion to approve, Your Honor.
I support, but I think that's Ives.
Ives?
Yeah, on one side it says Eves, but on our application it's Ives.
Yeah.
Apologize for the typo.
All right, we'll make that correction with the motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. B, approve special event permit St. Clair Chamber of Commerce Beer and Wine Festival. Chief?
I've received a request from the Chamber for their annual Beer and Wine Festival on June 6th. All the paperwork is in. Recommend you approve it.
Motion to approve.
Support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? C is vendor hour extension.
Oh, yes, Your Honor. As part of that event, it is necessary to extend the vendor hours for our local restaurants to participate. Typical vendor hours are 9 to 9. According to our ordinance, it is recommended that the city extend the Beer and Wine Fest vendor hours to 11 p.m. in accordance with the applicable sections of the city code.
So moved.
Support. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number 11 is claims and accounts for January 23rd and January 30th, 2020.
Okay, no questions, Your Honor. Make a motion to approve as presented.
Support.
Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, number 12 is public comment or public questions. Anything not agenda item, questions, comments? All right, we'll go to number 13, Mayor and Council. I have just a, really one thing. I want to thank the people from the Woodlands who came. Thanks for your insight. We will put our people on and find out what we can find.
And we'll get started on the assessment roll too, which would give an actual cost. And I will say that real quick, if you'll let me, I counted on, there looks like there's 27 lots in that development that abut the roadway. Again, doing back of the envelope calculations for a 15-year special assessment without interest, I came at $574 a year. But again, that is based on, just dividing by the number of lots. That's not based on the width of the lots, so I don't want to put much stock into that number at all, just to have everybody, a ballpark figure, we're looking at 574, and, it would be a very, very minimum estimate, with before the interest, and then the actual road frontage is taken into account.
Is that including the 25%?
That is if the city contributed 25%, yes. Yes, that would be the resident's share of the 75% remaining.
Yeah. All right, anybody else have anything?
Another question.
Yes, sir.
Dave Broadbridge up at 1998 Woodland Estates, and oh boy, what was I going up here to say? Now that I walked up here. We're paying, it was at the last meeting it was brought up, that we're paying a certain amount for the city tax. Everybody in the city pays a certain amount. I don't know what that is per thousand, $31, whatever it is. But everybody's paying that, and the question was brought up, are we paying that on Woodland Estates subdivision also? And they said yes. Can they take that into account when you're doing your checking into whatever's going on with the money? Can they take that into account too? I know you said 25%. We're paying, over the years, I just moving in there, so I haven't been paying those taxes. But the taxes have been being paid by those people that live in that subdivision equal with all the taxes in the whole city. Well, this isn't a finished road. It's not a finished subdivision. Why are they paying that higher tax in my mind? That's what I'm just getting at. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
I have to let that marinate for a while.
It's.
What have you been paying taxes for? Is that what you're asking?
I guess, yeah. And can they take that into account when you're looking at the money that was the bond, the bank that has it, where'd the $17,000 go? There was a bank letter, where did that money go? That. But also take into account the taxes that these people have been paying in the subdivision. There's equal with everybody in the whole city, and they have finished subs, they have all the amenities, they have the, whatever, and we don't.
Right.
So just take that into account, because that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Dave.
Do you guys have garbage pickup and rakes, or leaves pickup and everything like that too?
Yeah, because
All right, anything else from Mayor or Council?
I have an announcement, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
The East China Educational Foundation is hosting its Chili Heart 5K run this Saturday, February 8th. Registration is still open, and you can also register on site at runsignup.com, or the website, or show up at St. Clair Middle School at 9 a.m. on Saturday. Hope to see you there.
All right, I'm going to ask for a motion to go into closed session to discuss pending litigation.
So moved.
Support. Call the roll, please.
Platt?
Yes.
Ellery?
Yes.
Kinsfater?
Yes.
Krupa?
Yes.
Laporte?
Yes.
McCartney?
Yes.
Cedar? Carried, Your Honor.
Thank you. We're going to go to closed session. You are more than welcome to stay. We will not be taking any action when we come out. Thank you for coming. Be careful going home.